For over 7 decades, the British monarchy has operated under a veil of absolute precision, a system where every birth, every death, and every succession is governed by ironclad rules that the public was never meant to see. But just 3 minutes ago, the mask didn't just slip, it was torn away by the king himself. King Charles, in a move that has sent the global intelligence community into a frenzy, has finally exposed the existence of the hidden Heir Protocol. This isn't a mere administrative update. This is a constitutional earthquake that threatens to rewrite the history of the House of Windsor and redefine who actually holds the right to the throne. Before we dive into the chilling details of this exposure, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to reveal is being scrubbed from official channels as we speak. For years, rumors circulated about a sealed folder in the Windsor archives, a document so sensitive that even senior royals were denied access. It was whispered to contain the contingency plans for a bloodline crisis, a secret roadmap for a scenario where the direct line of succession was compromised by scandal, illness, or something far more sinister. While the world was focused on the drama in Montecito, King Charles was reportedly standing in a cold, underground vault, staring at the very evidence the palace machine had fought for a century to keep buried. Insiders claim the king's decision to break silence wasn't a calculated PR move, it was an act of desperation. He realized that the polished palace lines were no longer enough to protect the institution from the rot of its own secrets. The protocol he exposed hints at a lineage inconsistency that dates back generations, a hidden heir whose existence nullifies the current standing of those in power. This is the confession the monarchy never prepared for. As Charles stood before a private camera, his voice shaking but his resolve hardened, he uttered the words that changed everything. The truth can no longer be contained by a crown that is bleeding from within. Within minutes of the exposure, the palace went into full blackout mode. Digital logs vanished, archival staff were placed on immediate leave, and the official narrative was hastily rewritten to label the king's statement as a momentary lapse in judgment. But the fire has already started. This isn't just about a hidden person. It's about a century of systemic deception where the public's trust was treated as a liability. Tonight, we are stripping back the layers of this protocol, looking at the vanished archives, the silenced witnesses, and the terrifying reason why Charles decided that the truth was more important than the survival of the mask. To understand why the hidden Heir Protocol exists, we have to look past the gilded gates of Buckingham Palace and into the shadows of a history that was supposed to be erased. This protocol isn't just a backup plan. It is a confession of a bloodline fracture. For decades, the palace has maintained a meticulously curated family tree, but King Charles's sudden exposure suggests that a branch was severed, or perhaps hidden in plain sight. We are talking about a lineage inconsistency that doesn't just shuffle the order of succession. It threatens to delegitimize the very crown Charles wears. This is the ghost that has haunted the Windsor archives for over a century, a secret so explosive that it required a specialized code of silence, known only to the sovereign and a handful of faceless executors. The chilling reality is that the hidden heir isn't a myth. Sources close to the archival leak suggest that during the early 20th century, a decision was made to bypass a specific individual due to unforeseen complications in their heritage. This person was moved off the official records, their identity scrubbed, and their descendants monitored by a shadow branch of the security services. Charles's decision to bring this to light now points to a terrifying realization that the rightful line of succession may have been compromised long before he ever took the throne. Imagine the psychological toll on a king who discovers that his entire life's purpose was built on a foundation of systemic displacement. He isn't just exposing a protocol, he is exposing a lie that has lived in his own blood. But why now? Why would Charles risk the total collapse of the monarchy in the twilight of his reign? The answer lies in the bleeding crown he mentioned. Insiders whisper that a modern-day crisis, a DNA match, a dying confession, or a digital breach, has made it impossible to keep the secret buried any longer. The hidden Heir Protocol was designed to be activated only when the survival of the institution was at its lowest ebb. By revealing it, Charles is essentially hitting the self-destruct button on the version of the monarchy we thought we knew. He is forcing a confrontation with a truth that the firm has spent billions to hide. The documents he gestured toward in that vaulted basement are said to contain more than just names. They contain the conditions of erasure. These were the specific legal and social mechanisms used to make a royal human being disappear from public consciousness. As we peel back this layer, we begin to see the terrifying power of the palace machine not as a symbol of tradition, but as a weapon of containment. The hidden heir represents every secret, every bypass, and every cold-blooded decision made in the name of continuity. Charles's voice didn't just shake from age. It shook from the weight of knowing that once this door is opened, the ghost of Windsor will never return to its grave. To understand the sheer scale of the hidden heir protocol, we have to recognize that an institution as ancient as the British monarchy does not keep secrets through luck. It keeps them through a sophisticated, invisible architecture of control. King Charles's revelation has shed light on what insiders call the shadow executors, a group of high-ranking intelligence officials, legal gatekeepers, and constitutional lawyers, whose only purpose is to ensure that the erasure remains absolute. These are the faceless individuals who manage the perception of reality that we, the public, consume as history. They are the ones who ensured that files disappeared from the Windsor archives and that anyone asking the wrong questions was quietly removed from the inner circle. The protocol Charles exposed reveals a disturbing level of surveillance that extends far beyond the palace walls. It wasn't just about hiding a name. It was about a century-long operation to monitor an entire branch of a family that didn't even know they were royal. This shadow branch of the state operated under the guise of national security, using the full weight of the crown's influence to redact records and manipulate digital footprints. The king's decision to speak now suggests that this surveillance state has reached its breaking point. In an era of digital leaks and DNA testing, the executors can no longer guarantee the containment of the truth. Charles is effectively admitting that the monarchy has been acting as a surveillance entity against its own blood to protect its public image. This isn't just theory. It is about the cold mechanics of power. When Charles stood in that underground vault, he wasn't just looking at old paper. He was looking at the ledgers of a moral war fought behind closed doors. He saw the reports from the specialists tasked with psychological containment, the same type of experts Meghan Markle reportedly turned to when she felt the machinery closing in on her own children. The protocol shows that the palace machine treated the hidden heir as a liability to be managed, rather than a human being with a right to their identity. It is the ultimate manifestation of the institution's motto: the crown must survive, no matter the human cost. By exposing the shadow executors, Charles is making a dangerous gamble. He is telling the world that the king himself is no longer willing to be a puppet of the very system he leads. He is revealing that the monarchy's stability was built on a foundation of enforced silence and state-sponsored erasure. As we move deeper into this investigation, the question shifts from who the heir is to what the system did to keep them hidden. Charles has pulled back the curtain on a surveillance state that exists solely to preserve a fairy tale, and in doing so, he has guaranteed that the fairy tale can never be told again with a straight face. The turning point that forced King Charles to activate the hidden heir protocol wasn't a change of heart. It was a catastrophic failure of the palace's digital fortress. For over a century, the monarchy relied on physical archives and sworn oaths of secrecy. But in the age of global genealogy, databases, and decentralized leaks, the shadow executors found themselves fighting a war they could no longer win. The exposure we are witnessing today began with a silent DNA breach, a match so precise and so high-profile that it bypassed every royal firewall. A distant relative, unaware of their connection to the crown, uploaded their genetic profile to a public site, unknowingly triggering a red alert sequence within the palace's security branch. This digital collapse is what insiders call the genomic leak. It wasn't just about a name appearing on a screen. It was about a mathematical certainty that threatened to invalidate the official succession line. King Charles was presented with a chilling briefing. The secret he had inherited was no longer contained. The hidden Heir Protocol was the only mechanism left to manage the fallout. By choosing to expose it himself, the king is attempting to control a narrative that was on the verge of being weaponized by external forces. He realized that it is far better for the crown to confess than to be exposed by a viral data leak that could spark a constitutional revolution. But the collapse isn't just technical, it's institutional. The protocol reveals that the palace had been paying millions to cybersecurity firms to suppress and redirect any digital searches related to the hidden branch of the family. This was a state-funded operation to manipulate public reality. As Charles walked through the vanished archives, he wasn't just seeing paper. He was seeing the receipts of a digital shadow war. The hidden heir isn't just a person. They are the catalyst for the death of royal privacy. The protocol proves that the monarch is no longer the master of his own history. The data is. What we are seeing now is the final desperate act of a dying system. The DNA breach proved that no amount of royal tradition can stand against the transparency of the modern world. As the digital logs continue to vanish and archival staff are silenced, the truth is already out there, circulating in the encrypted corners of the web. Charles's exposure of the protocol is an admission that the palace's divine right to keep secrets has been permanently revoked by the very technology that was supposed to modernize the throne. The hidden heir is no longer a ghost in the machine. They are the machine's ultimate failure. The exposure of the hidden Heir Protocol marks the definitive moment of moral bankruptcy for the British monarchy, a realization that the institution has spent over a century trading human lives for the sake of public image. King Charles's decision to reveal this mechanism wasn't just a reaction to a data leak. It was a profound choice to end a cycle of institutional cruelty that had claimed the identities of his own blood. He recognized that the conditions of erasure weren't just legal documents. They were a legacy of trauma, a pattern of behavior that mirrored the very same tactics used to dismantle the reputation of Princess Diana and, more recently, to silence the concerns surrounding the children in Montecito. The king realized that he could no longer lead an institution that was more afraid of its own truth than of its own collapse. For Charles, this was the ultimate sovereign's choice: to continue as a puppet of the shadow executors, or to stand as a man of conscience. Insiders reveal that the king's voice shook, not because he feared the public's reaction, but because he finally understood the sheer volume of lies he had been forced to protect since the day he was born. By activating the protocol, he is effectively admitting that the divine right of kings was used as a shield for state-sponsored deception. He is choosing to humanize the crown at the cost of its perceived perfection, acknowledging that even the most ancient institution can bleed when it is cut by its own secrets. This moral crisis has created a terminal divide within the royal household. While Charles chooses transparency, the palace machine is still desperately trying to manage the optics, attempting to paint the king's confession as the rambling of a tired man rather than the clarity of a leader. The protocol reveals that the monarchy's stability was a manufactured reality, a stage-managed fairy tale where the background was always more important than the actors. Charles has finally reached his breaking point, refusing to let another generation be sacrificed to the gears of a system that views human vulnerability as a liability to the firm. Tonight, the hidden heir is no longer just a constitutional problem. It is a test of the monarchy's survival in the 21st century. Can an institution that has thrived on secrecy adapt to a world that demands honest vulnerability? Charles has gambled everything on the hope that the truth, no matter how devastating, is the only thing that can prevent the crown from slipping away into irrelevance. He has chosen to stop hanging beautiful pictures over the cracks and has finally decided to look directly at the structural decay of the palace walls. The exposure of the hidden Heir Protocol has not only fractured the internal structure of the palace, it has triggered a global fallout that threatens to dismantle the British Commonwealth itself. Nations that have long looked to the British monarchy as a symbol of stability and continuity are now forced to confront a reality built on systemic deception. As news of the lineage inconsistency spreads, leaders across the Commonwealth are demanding transparency, questioning whether the institution they fund and support is rooted in a fundamental lie. The King's revelation has effectively handed every Republican movement in the world a lethal weapon, confirming their long-held suspicion that the Crown is more committed to its own secrecy than to its moral obligations. In world capitals, from Ottawa to Canberra, the narrative has shifted from respectful tradition to deep institutional skepticism. Diplomatic cables, leaked in the wake of Charles's announcement, suggest that foreign intelligence agencies had long been monitoring the shadow executors, but they never anticipated that the sovereign himself would be the one to burn down the temple. The hidden heir isn't just a British problem. It is a crisis for every nation that maintains the king as their head of state. If the person on the throne is there because of a managed erasure of the rightful line, then every law signed and every ceremony performed under that authority is now under a shadow of constitutional illegitimacy. Inside the palace, the panic is no longer about the UK tabloids. It is about the sovereign survival plan for the 21st century. The protocol revealed that the Crown's international influence was maintained through a global network of information suppression. As these digital firewalls collapse, the Commonwealth is reaching a breaking point. Leaders are asking, if a king has to overrule his entire court just to tell the truth about his bloodline, what other secrets are being kept from the millions of people who still live under the shadow of the Crown? The global reaction has been a wildfire of speculation and feverish debate. This is the moment where the fairy tale monarchy meets the cold reality of modern geopolitical accountability. Charles's exposure of the protocol has proved that the monarchy doesn't just manage feelings, it manages global perception, and that management has failed. As we look at the protests and the calls for reform rising across the globe, it becomes clear that the hidden heir is the catalyst for a world that is finally tired of being fed polished palace lines without context. As King Charles tears down the walls of secrecy, a new and more personal conflict has erupted within the palace. A royal civil war between the sovereign and his heir. Prince William, once the king's most trusted ally, now stands as his most formidable adversary in a battle over the very survival of the crown. Insiders describe a scene of cold, clipped confrontation behind closed doors, where the weight of the hidden heir protocol has turned father against son. For William, the exposure of the erasure is an act of institutional suicide. He sees his father not as a man of conscience, but as a king who has reached his breaking point and is taking the future of the monarchy down with him. This isn't just a family argument, it is a collision of two entirely different philosophies of power. William has been trained his entire life by the shadow executors to believe that the survival of the institution justifies any amount of silence. He reportedly views the king's transparency as a betrayal of the bloodline, a reckless abandonment of the optics that have kept the Windsors in power for a century. According to sources, William's fury boiled over during a private briefing where he accused the king of destroying the very legacy he is meant to inherit. The Prince of Wales is now the primary voice for the palace machine, fighting to seal the archives that Charles has already begun to leak. The tension has reached a terminal state, mirroring the psychological rift that once dismantled the reputation of Princess Diana. While Charles speaks of the bleeding crown and the need for honest vulnerability, William is doubling down on protocol, attempting to bypass the king's authority to maintain control over the narrative. This is a sovereign's choice versus a future king's survival instinct. The protocol reveals that the monarchy's stability was always a fragile theater, and now the actors are no longer following the same script. William is no longer just the heir. He has become the guardian of the secrets that his father is determined to burn. The global public is watching a fracture that can never be repaired. If a king has to overrule his entire court and his own son just to tell the truth, then the institution is no longer a family. It is a battleground. The hidden heir has become the wedge that has split the House of Windsor in two. As we look at the cold detachment between the king and his heir, we realize that the fairy tale is officially over. Charles has chosen humanity, but William is choosing the crown, and in this civil war, there may be no throne left to sit on when the dust finally settles. The chaos within the palace has now moved beyond a family feud and into a full-blown intelligence crisis, with the emergence of the missing files. For decades, these specific records, marked with the highest level of secrecy, were believed to have been destroyed during the transition of power, but they have now resurfaced in the hands of a high-level whistleblower. This individual, a former member of the Windsor archival staff, has come forward to confirm that the hidden Heir Protocol wasn't just a contingency, it was a living, breathing operation of systemic erasure. The whistleblower reveals that the files King Charles sought were surgically removed from the digital logs just days before his coronation, a deliberate act of sabotage by the shadow executors to keep the new king in the dark about his own family's history. These missing files reportedly contain more than just names. They contain the confidential medical assessments that Charles alluded to in his vault confession. The whistleblower claims that these documents prove the palace machine didn't just hide a person. They monitored their health, their movements, and even their financial stability for 3 generations. This level of institutional stalking was funded by the Crown to ensure that the perceived reality of the royal bloodline remained untainted. As the details of these files begin to leak, the narrative of a harmless fairy tale monarchy is being replaced by the image of a cold-blooded surveillance entity. The stakes were raised even further when the whistleblower identified the specific protocol for containment, a set of instructions on how to discredit any descendant of the hidden branch who might accidentally discover their royal heritage. This confirms the king's fear that the monarchy had prepared to go to war against its own innocent blood to protect its secrets. Charles's decision to expose the protocol has effectively shielded the whistleblower, allowing the truth to flow through the cracks of a crumbling system. The palace can no longer claim that these documents don't exist. The trail has been turned into a public road. Now, the world is waiting for the most explosive revelation of all: the contents of the lineage inconsistency report buried within those files. If what the whistleblower claims is true, the current direct line of succession is based on a strategic bypass that occurred nearly a century ago, a move that would make the current distribution of royal authority constitutionally void. King Charles has signaled that he is ready to face this reckoning, but the shadow executors are reportedly preparing their final counterstrike. The missing files are no longer just history. They are the evidence in a trial that will determine whether the British monarchy deserves to exist in a world of truth. The final collapse of the firm has begun, not with a public protest, but with a king's ultimatum that has shattered the internal peace of the House of Windsor. King Charles, fueled by the evidence within the missing files and the testimony of the whistleblower, has issued a direct demand to the shadow executors: total transparency or immediate abdication. This wasn't just a political threat. It was a moral strike against a system that he now views as fundamentally reckless and dangerous. Charles has reportedly given the institutional gatekeepers 72 hours to declassify every document related to the hidden Heir Protocol, signaling that he is no longer willing to reign over a kingdom of secrets. The reaction from within the royal machine has been one of pure terror. For the first time in history, the sovereign is acting as the ultimate insider who has turned against his own organization. The shadow executors, who have long relied on the king's cooperation to maintain the fairy tale, now find themselves facing a leader who is ready to burn down the entire stage to save the truth. According to Palace Whispers, the king's ultimatum has created a power vacuum where protocol is being ignored and emergency contingency plans are being activated to bypass the sovereign's authority. This is the night the palace dropped its guard, revealing a system that has reached its ultimate breaking point. In the corridors of power, the royal civil war has reached its most desperate phase. While Charles demands honesty, the remnants of the old guard are attempting to contain the sovereign, using the very same psychological containment tactics once used against his own family. The king is being told that his transparency is a threat to national stability, but he has countered with a chilling truth: a monarchy that cannot face its own history has no right to a future. This is no longer about managing optics or polishing a public image. It is about the confession of an institution that has realized it can bleed. As the deadline approaches, the firm is breaking into factions. Some staffers, moved by the king's honest vulnerability, have begun to leak supporting data, while others remain fiercely loyal to the Prince of Wales and the old ways of secrecy. The hidden heir has become the symbol of this institutional decay, a vulnerable pimple that has finally burst, exposing the infection beneath the skin. King Charles's ultimatum is the final push to move the monarchy from what to how, from what they say to the public, to how they actually treated the humans behind the crown. The stage is set for a final revelation that will either reset the monarchy or end it forever. As the final grain of sand falls through the hourglass of King Charles's ultimatum, the silence of the British monarchy has been replaced by a roar of truth that can never be hushed again. The final disclosure of the hidden heir protocol is not just the end of a secret, it is the beginning of a new, uncertain era for the House of Windsor. In his final address from the shadows of the Windsor archives, the king did not speak as a distant sovereign, but as a man who had finally reclaimed his soul from the machinery of the state. He confirmed the identity of the lineage that had been erased, acknowledging that the continuity of the throne was maintained through a century of cold-blooded displacement. The hidden heir is no longer a ghost. They are a living reminder of the institution's capacity for both grand tradition and profound cruelty. The future of the crown now hangs in a state of constitutional limbo. By exposing the protocol, King Charles has effectively dismantled the myth of the divine right and replaced it with a demand for human accountability. He has signaled to the world and to the Commonwealth that the monarchy can only survive if it is willing to bleed in public. The firm as we knew it, a faceless entity of information, suppression, and psychological containment, has been broken by the very hand that wore its ring. The fallout is permanent. The archives are open, the shadow executors are in retreat, and the relationship between the British people and their sovereign has been fundamentally rewritten. It is no longer a bond of blind loyalty, but a contract of transparent vulnerability. To the royal loyalists and the shadow guard who fought to keep the files buried, Charles's final message was a chilling warning. The crown may forget, but the truth never fades. He has left the institution in a state of remission, a chance to heal, but only if it accepts the scars of its own history. Prince William now faces a choice that will define the rest of his life: to reign over a monarchy of truth, or to try and rebuild a kingdom of shadows. But the world has seen the hidden heir now. They have seen the receipts of the surveillance, the mechanics of the erasure, and the personal cost of the crown. The fairy tale is dead, but in its place, something far more real has been born. As we close this investigation into the protocol that shook the world, one haunting truth remains. This wasn't just about a hidden heir. It was about the power of a mother's cry, a king's conscience, and a digital era that refuses to be silenced. King Charles has ensured that while the monarchy may one day fall, it will not fall because of a lie. The hidden heir is finally home, and the crown is finally honest. The battle for the throne is over, but the battle for the truth is just beginning. Thank you for staying with us through this journey into the dark heart of the palace. The silence is over, and the future has finally arrived.